They mocked the poor girl's fake designer dress at prom, until the mayor walked over and asked her to dance. The laughter started before Lily Harper had even fully walked through the ballroom doors. She heard it before she understood it. A ripple of sound near the entrance, sharp and pointed. The particular kind of laughter that isn't about anything funny at all. She kept walking, chin level, the way she'd trained herself to walk through hallways all year. And it wasn't until Madison Cole's voice rang out clearly across the entrance that she understood the laughter belonged to her. "That's from like 3 seasons ago," Madison said, not quietly, examining Lily's dress with the practiced eye of someone who spent considerable time studying designer labels. "Did you get it off some fake website?" Someone else pointed at her shoes. "The logo's crooked. That's definitely not real." Lily kept her smile fixed in place, the way she'd learned to do years ago, the way that had gotten her through countless smaller moments just like this one. She didn't explain that the dress had come from a charity boutique, carefully restored stitch by stitch by her cousin's hands. She didn't explain that her father had spent months quietly saving for shoes with a small scratch and a slightly faded logo, purchased second-hand, because that was the only version of designer either of them could ever actually afford. She simply walked past the laughter into the ballroom, found the nearest bathroom, and locked herself inside a stall before the tears she refused to shed in public could finally catch up with her. Lily had spent her entire senior year trying to stay invisible, an art she'd perfected out of necessity rather than choice. She lived with her 42-year-old father, Daniel Harper, in a small rented house on the edge of town, the two of them having learned, since her mother's death when Lily was 9, to count every dollar without ever once complaining about the counting out loud. Daniel worked 2 jobs, repairing farm equipment during the day, driving a delivery route several evenings a week, the kind of steady, exhausting work that kept a roof over their heads and food on the table, but left almost nothing left over for anything resembling extravagance. Lily had grown up watching him come home smelling of engine grease, eat dinner standing up because he was already running late for his second shift, and fall asleep most nights in his recliner rather than his own bed, too tired to make it down the hallway. She'd never once heard him complain. That, more than anything, was what made her own quiet sacrifices feel bearable. The understanding, absorbed slowly over years, that her father cared far more than she ever would, and carried it without asking anyone to notice. Lily had told him, weeks before prom, that she didn't even want to go. Daniel had known immediately that she was lying, the way fathers sometimes simply know these things about their daughters, and he'd said nothing about it, only quietly started setting aside a little extra from each paycheck, without telling her why. He'd skipped his own Friday coffee ritual at the diner near his shop. He'd put off replacing a pair of worn work boots for another month. Small sacrifices, invisible to anyone but him, all of them quietly funneling toward a night his daughter had insisted she didn't care about. He couldn't afford the designer dress she'd once admired silently in a shop window downtown, the kind of admiration she thought she'd hidden well enough that nobody noticed, though Daniel had noticed, had watched her slow down in front of that window 3 separate times over the course of a single afternoon, and had filed the memory away without saying anything at all. He found something better, in his own quiet way, a beautiful second-hand formal dress at a local charity boutique, worn but well made, the kind of dress that simply needed someone to care about it properly again. Lily's 24-year-old cousin Nora had taken on the alterations herself, replacing the worn zipper, adjusting the sleeves to fit Lily's frame, adding small, careful, hand-sewn details that transformed the dress from simply wearable into something that looked, in the right light, genuinely beautiful. "You don't have to do all this," Lily had told Nora, watching her hunched over the fabric one evening, needle moving with practiced precision. "I know," Nora had said, not looking up. "I want to." Daniel had found the shoes separately, second-hand designer flats, with a slightly faded logo and one small scratch along the side, purchased for a fraction of their original price, from a resale shop 2 towns over. They weren't perfect. Lily loved them anyway. more than any brand new pair could have possibly made her feel, because she understood exactly what her father had sacrificed to find them for her. On prom night, Lily came downstairs to find her father waiting with his old camera, the same one he'd used for every school photo and birthday since her mother had passed. He simply stared at her for a long moment, saying nothing, his expression carrying more than words usually managed. "Your mother would have loved this dress," he said finally, voice rough. Lily smiled, suddenly shy in a way that surprised her. "You think?" "I know," Daniel said, and his eyes went visibly watery, though he blinked it back quickly, unwilling to let the moment tip fully into tears. He raised the camera and took the photograph anyway, hands not quite steady. Before she left, Daniel pressed a small envelope into her hands, containing the last of what he'd managed to save. Lily immediately tried to give it back, understanding exactly how much it represented, unwilling to let him spend one more dollar he could barely afford. "Dad, I don't need this, really. Tonight isn't about what we couldn't afford," Daniel told her, refusing to take it back. "It's about you finally letting yourself have one beautiful night." He closed her fingers gently around the envelope. "Let me have this too, Lilybug, please." She'd arrived at prom nervous but genuinely happy, the small envelope tucked carefully into her clutch, her father's words still warm in her chest. Then everything had changed within minutes of walking through the door. Standing alone in the bathroom stall, Lily touched the careful stitching along her dress's sleeve, Nora's work, painstaking and precise, and whispered to herself, quiet enough that nobody could hear, "Dad worked so hard for this." She didn't cry, not fully, not yet. She simply stood there a long moment, gathering whatever composure she had left, staring at the small, careful stitches along the hem, until the shame in her chest loosened just enough to breathe around, until a soft knock sounded at the bathroom door. "Lily, it's Marcus." Marcus Reed, 18 years old, her closest friend since freshman year, a quiet scholarship student who understood, better than almost anyone else at their school, exactly what it felt like to pretend you weren't embarrassed about money. He'd noticed her disappearing from the ballroom within seconds, some instinct honed by years of watching for exactly this kind of quiet unraveling. The same instinct that had once made him the first person to notice when Lily skipped lunch 3 days running, during a particularly hard month for her family, and simply started sitting beside her with an extra sandwich, no explanation offered or requested. "I want to go home," Lily admitted, stepping out of the stall, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking slightly at the edges. "No," Marcus said simply, gently, but with a firmness that surprised her. "They don't get to decide whether you belong here." "Easy for you to say. Nobody's laughing at your shoes." "They laughed at my backpack sophomore year," Marcus reminded her quietly. "The one with the broken zipper I held together with a safety pin, for 4 months, because we couldn't afford a new one. I remember exactly how it felt. I also remember it stopped mattering eventually. Not because the backpack got better, because I stopped letting their opinion decide my worth." He didn't let her disappear that night. He walked her back into the ballroom, staying close by her side, and though Lily still kept to the edges of the room, unwilling to fully rejoin the celebration that had turned briefly cruel, she stayed. The evening's special guest arrived not long after, 36-year-old Mayor Adrian Bennett, attending because the town's small scholarship program traditionally sent a representative to the senior prom each year. Adrian was young for a mayor, respected throughout town for genuine community work rather than empty political gestures, having grown up in this same small town himself, before eventually returning to serve it. He moved through the ballroom quietly, greeting a few familiar faces, watching the students dance with the easy, unhurried attention of someone who genuinely enjoyed these small community events, rather than merely tolerating them. Then he noticed Lily, standing at the edge of the room, and something about her posture, careful, guarded, trying deliberately to take up as little space as possible, caught his attention before anything else did. He recognized that posture. He'd worn it himself, plenty of times, growing up in a house where his own mother stretched every dollar until it nearly tore. He looked closer, not at the dress's apparent age, not at whatever label Madison Cole had so confidently identified earlier. At the stitching itself, careful, hand-finished work along the sleeves and hem, the kind of detailed craftsmanship that took real skill and real time to execute properly. Adrian's own mother had run a small alterations shop in town for over 20 years before she passed. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He'd spent countless childhood afternoons sitting on a stool in the back of that shop, watching her hands move exactly this way over exactly this kind of stitching, learning without meaning to what real craftsmanship looked like against the cheap, machine-made alternative. He crossed the room toward her, and gradually the ballroom began to quiet, students turning to watch the mayor's unexpected path directly toward the girl who'd been mocked at the entrance less than an hour earlier. He extended his hand. "Would you give me this dance?" Lily stared at him, certain for one disoriented moment that he must be speaking to someone else entirely. Glancing around to check. "Me?" Adrian smiled, warm and genuine. "Yes, you." The same students who'd laughed at her shoes now stared in complete silence, the shift in the room's attention almost audible. Lily hesitated only a moment longer before placing her hand in his, and together they stepped onto the dance floor. "I noticed everyone looking at what you were wearing," Adrian told her quietly, once they'd settled into the slow rhythm of the dance, voice pitched low enough that only she could hear it. "I noticed you were the only person in the room trying to make yourself smaller." Lily's eyes filled, the composure she'd maintained all evening finally threatening to break. "I just didn't want anyone to know we don't have much." "Having less money doesn't make you less worthy of being seen," Adrian said simply. "You don't even know me," Lily said, half a laugh, half something closer to tears. "No," Adrian agreed, "but I know this dress. My mother ran an alterations shop right here in town for 20 years. I grew up watching her do exactly this kind of stitching by hand. Whoever made these repairs knew what they were doing. That's not something you fake." It became quietly the emotional turning point of Lily's entire night. Not a rescue, not a rich man swooping in to fix her problems, but a single sentence from someone who genuinely understood something about worth that had nothing to do with price tags. Adrian didn't turn the moment into a spectacle. He asked her, once the dance had ended, what she wanted to do after graduation. "I want to study fashion and textile design," Lily admitted, the confession slipping out before she'd fully decided to share it. "But I've never really believed college was realistic. Not for us." Adrian considered that a moment. "The town runs a small annual scholarship program," he said. "Arts and design categories included. You should apply." It was a simple suggestion, offered without fanfare, but it planted itself firmly in Lily's mind for the rest of the evening. Marcus stayed close beside her for the remainder of the night, making certain she actually enjoyed what was left of it, and by the time Nora arrived to pick her up, the entire ballroom had shifted its opinion of the dress entirely. Several girls now approaching Lily directly, asking with genuine curiosity rather than mockery, where exactly the beautiful gown had come from. Even Madison Cole lingered near the coat check a moment longer than necessary, offering Lily an awkward, half-formed compliment about the dress that neither of them fully acknowledged as an apology, though both of them understood it functioned as one. The next morning, Lily braced herself for continued humiliation online, certain the story would spread in the cruelest possible version. Instead, she found a photograph of herself dancing with the mayor circulating quietly through the town's social media, accompanied by warm, admiring comments, rather than the ridicule she'd expected. But the real story, the one that mattered most, wasn't about a mayor rescuing a poor girl from embarrassment. It was about what happened next. Several local women, seeing the photograph, recognized something specific about the dress's design. The particular hand-stitching technique along the hem once famous locally, created by a small tailoring business that had closed years earlier. Nora explained, once Lily asked her directly, that the charity boutique had accidentally received several old garments from that closed business's remaining stock, overlooked simply because they'd fallen out of current fashion trends. Lily's fake dress wasn't fake at all. It had history, real, documented, nearly forgotten history. She became fascinated almost immediately, spending hours researching the technique, discovering that generations of local seamstresses had used this exact method, women whose careful, skilled work had never been properly documented or credited anywhere. She found herself in the town's small historical society archive on a Saturday afternoon, sorting through old photographs of women bent over sewing machines in a shop that had closed before Lily was even born, feeling something click into place she hadn't known was missing. With Marcus's help, she began a small school project, interviewing older women throughout the community who'd once sewn, repaired, and redesigned clothing out of necessity rather than choice. Women who'd kept families clothed through hard decades, using nothing but skill, patience, and whatever fabric happened to be available. Marcus handled the recording equipment and interview scheduling with the same quiet reliability he brought to everything, while Lily learned to ask the right questions, to sit patiently through long pauses, while an 80-year-old woman remembered a technique she hadn't used in decades. The project attracted more attention than Lily had expected. A retired seamstress named Evelyn Brooks, 67 years old, sharp-eyed, and endlessly patient, became Lily's mentor almost by accident, teaching her techniques for restoring old fabric instead of discarding it, showing her how to see potential in materials most people would have thrown away without a second thought. "Anybody can buy new," Evelyn told her once, guiding Lily's hands through an unfamiliar stitch. "It takes a different kind of eye to see what's still good in something everyone else has given up on." Lily began transforming inexpensive second-hand clothes into entirely original designs, working late into the evenings at the kitchen table while her father watched from across the room, quietly amazed. For the first time, Daniel understood that the dress he'd struggled to afford hadn't simply given his daughter one beautiful night. It had helped her discover, unexpectedly, exactly what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. Then a letter arrived from a respected fashion school in the city. Lily had been accepted. The tuition, however, sat far beyond anything Daniel could realistically afford, even accounting for every extra shift he might possibly take on. Lily decided, quietly and without much argument, that she simply couldn't go. Daniel began secretly looking into loan paperwork, unwilling to let his daughter's acceptance become another door closed by circumstances outside her control. Nora caught him at it late one evening, papers spread across the kitchen table, his expression carrying the particular exhaustion of a man trying to solve an impossible equation alone. "You spent years teaching Lily that she shouldn't feel ashamed of having less," Nora told him plainly. "Don't let her give up her future because you feel ashamed that you can't pay for everything yourself." Daniel sat with that a long moment, recognizing the truth in it, even as it stung. "I just don't want her to feel like she has to ask for help to have the life she wants," he admitted. "She's not asking for a handout," Nora said gently. "She's asking for a chance. There's a difference, and I think you know it." Instead of trying to shoulder the entire burden alone, the family began working together on Lily's behalf. Marcus helped assemble her application portfolio, spending hours photographing her early designs from every angle, staying up late fixing lighting and backgrounds until each piece looked exactly as good as the work itself deserved. Evelyn wrote a recommendation letter detailing Lily's natural talent and rapid skill development. The kind of letter that carried real weight because it came from someone who spent a lifetime around genuine craftsmanship. Nora photographed the finished pieces professionally, donating her time entirely, refusing every offer of payment Daniel tried to press on her. And Adrian unexpectedly supported the town scholarship committee's decision to expand its arts and design category, not specifically crafted for Lily alone, but for students exactly like her, talented and determined, but lacking the financial resources that so often determined who got to pursue their dreams and who didn't. Lily eventually received enough combined aid to attend. Before leaving for college, she returned to the same prom venue with her father, one final visit before starting the next chapter of her life. She wore the same dress. But this time, she'd redesigned it entirely herself, removing the damaged sections that time and wear had claimed, carefully preserving Nora's original stitching wherever possible. Adding a small piece of fabric salvaged from one of Evelyn's own old dresses, weaving old history into something new. Daniel looked at her, something soft and proud crossing his weathered face. "So, you fixed it?" "No, Dad, I changed it." She looked down at the dress, running her fingers over the newly added fabric. "That's different." Daniel studied the dress a long moment, understanding settling slowly into his expression. "Your mother would have loved watching you do that," he said quietly. "Not just wear something beautiful. Build it yourself." Months later, Lily's first college collection debuted, inspired entirely by repaired clothing and the generations of people who'd once made things last simply because they'd had no other choice. She called the collection Worth Keeping. At its center stood a recreated version of the original prom dress. Not because it had once been mistaken for designer, not because a mayor had once asked her to dance, because it reminded her, every time she looked at it, of the night she'd almost let other people's opinions convince her she wasn't enough. At the collection's small hometown exhibition, Daniel stood proudly beside her, camera in hand exactly as he had that first prom night. Marcus was there, older now but recognizably the same steady presence he'd always been, examining each piece with the quiet pride of someone who'd helped carry the project from its very first fumbling interview. Nora attended, beaming with the particular pride of someone who'd helped build something from its very first careless stitch. Evelyn sat near the front, watching her former students work with quiet satisfaction, occasionally leaning over to whisper a detail she recognized in one design or another. And Adrian stood quietly near the back, watching the whole evening unfold without needing to be at its center. Lily eventually made her way over to him. "You know," she said, smiling, "I almost went home that night." Adrian smiled back. "I'm glad you stayed." Lily looked toward her father, still moving carefully through the small crowd with his old camera, photographing every piece of his daughter's collection like it was the most important work he'd ever witnessed. "So am I," she said. Because that night had never really been about a mayor asking a poor girl to dance. It had been about a father who'd given his daughter one beautiful evening when he could barely afford it. A friend who'd refused to let her disappear into shame. A community that eventually recognized the value in what a few cruel voices had mocked. And a young woman who'd learned, in the hardest possible way, that nothing becomes worthless simply because someone else fails to recognize its value. And years later, whenever Lily wore that dress, restored, redesigned, carrying every stitch of its long history, she remembered the most important thing her father had ever taught her. You don't need to look rich to be worth something. If this story reminded you that true worth was never measured by a price tag, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. Leave it a like, and stay a little longer. There's always another story worth telling.